Guys, I'm so excited that you'll be joining us in this online incubator where I'm going to be sharing with you the most effective, high impact skills that you're going to need to become an effective feedback giver and also someone that leans into receiving feedback in a meaningful way to help you grow through this journey of life, right? So let's get cracking. In this first session, I'm just going to share kind of our definition of feedback. And based on that definition of feedback, we are going to unpack kind of the key elements in that definition, and that's going to equip us to do some role play and with the skills that we need to get this done. During the Super Skills course and during your incubation stage, where we're going to really delve into feedback, the art of giving and receiving, I would encourage you guys to take loads of notes. It is a very, very kind of theoretical, intellectual module or super skill to acquire. So there's a lot that you have to wrap your head around and reframe. So the only way you're going to really get the most out of this is if you take a minute, and if there's something that resonated with you, to just jot that down so you can reflect on that later, a little bit later on. There is a lot of reframing that has to happen for you to become a high impact feedback giver, but also receptive to receiving feedback from anybody. So I would encourage you to participate, take notes, pause if there's something that you're just like, wow, that means something for me. Pause and let it marinate. Don't let that moment pass you by. And yes, so we are definitely going to have practicals too. So it's not, we have to ground the learning with practical. But as a word of caution, it is a very, intensely intellectual incubation space that we're going to go into. So if you do need to reframe, take the minute and reframe. First, let's create an alignment in terms of our definition of feedback, because this is going to form the foundation of the entire incubation stage, where we're going to leverage this definition over and over and over again to kind of glean learnings and start to reframe how we see feedback in the art of giving feedback. Okay, so receiving and giving feedback. So feedback is the art of communicating to someone where there is a disconnect in their behavior, their inputs, and the environment, okay? And doing so in a way that is receivable, actionable, and rewarding for the receiver. So that's a mouthful, and we've got the definition down here for you as well. So if you want to pause and just write that down, we are going to be referring back to this a lot. So this is what we're going to use to unpack kind of the next journey. So before I get into starting to pick apart, the first part of our definition, I really want to land with you guys why it's important that you become restless around being a high impact feedback giver, but also become restless around looking for feedback and seeking out individuals that are going to be fearless in giving you feedback. The reality is, guys, and we know this to be true without consciously thinking about it, you cannot change what you cannot see. We all have blind spots, whether it be from a professional or a skill point of view, whether it be from a leadership point of view, whether it be relationally or how we engage in our community. We all have blind spots. The fundamental problem is that we have become so hypersensitive to saying something that we perceive to be offensive to anybody, that we've become a generation that doesn't give helpful or meaningful feedback to each other, which means that we go through life and we allow our people to go through life without ever addressing the blind spots, which means we never faced with the opportunity to pivot or do something meaningful about it. You cannot change what you cannot see, and you cannot see your blind spots. Feedback fills that gap for you and for your people. When you become a high impact feedback giver, you are the person that is helping people take a look at what they previously couldn't see and presenting them with an opportunity to then correct that behavior. And all that is about becoming a more high impact human being and a more valuable contribution, whether it be to an organization, a relationship, or to society. Okay, so fundamentally, the reason feedback is so incredibly powerful and so absolutely should be an absolute requirement for human existence is because you cannot change what you cannot see, and you can't see your blind spots. And the only thing that can fill that gap is feedback, high impact feedback, not criticism. We're going to get to that. Okay. I'm sure you've all come across a human like this. The best feedback givers make the medicine taste like sugar. And you're just like leaning into it and you want more, and they're telling you everything about, all these disconnects that they see in the way you're showing up, your environment, your intention, all that kind of stuff. And you're just like lapping it up, going, give me more, give me more, give me more. Hopefully by the end of this incubation phase, that's going to be you. You're going to be that high impact giver where you can make any medicine taste like sugar. Okay, so the other reason from a contextual level why feedback is important, and this I would consider, so especially if you're a leader and you want to become a high impact feedback giver, the reality is feedback allows us a level of safety, so it creates a psychological safety net. Because what I know, when you are a leader giving me feedback, if you're loving me enough to tell me the truth about where I'm going wrong, okay, I feel safe. I feel safe enough to go hard at life because I know that I've got someone who will tell me when I have a blind spot. So it creates a feeling of safety and security and trust, right? The other reason feedback is so critical and important is from a hierarchy point of view in an organization. Feedback allows your people that you lead to ascertain a level of ranking. Where am I in relation to X, Y, Z, whether it be another human being or whether it be your expectations. So from a safety and a ranking point of view, feedback is unbelievably powerful for you as a gift to deliver to your human beings, but also to receive, to know where you're at, and to know that you can absolutely take your foot off the brake and hit the accelerator because there's someone that's going to tell you the truth when you need to pivot. Okay, so feedback, that from a context point of view, that's what's important. The other thing that we need to lay down foundationally going through the next couple of sessions is that it takes a huge amount of vulnerability, authentic love for the person you're giving feedback to, and courage to give feedback and also to receive it in a way that is helpful, forward and upward. As human beings, we are kind of programmed to avoid pain, to avoid making people uncomfortable, to avoid making ourselves uncomfortable. It's kind of hardwired into our DNA, right? So to be willing to make yourself uncomfortable and potentially lose favor with the person you're giving feedback to takes a lot of courage. It means you've got to be really vulnerable about your intention, and it comes from a place of real authentic love. So I want you to know that when you're stepping into a space of feedback and you're going to be giving feedback or receiving feedback from a very foundational level, you need to check your intent. You need to check the place you're coming from to give this feedback. Because feedback, guys, if you go back to the definition, it's receivable, actionable, and rewarding. And if you're just criticizing, that's not feedback, and that's not coming from the right place. In order for it to be receivable, actionable, and rewarding, it needs to come from a real, authentic love and consideration for the people that you're leading. You have to be vulnerable enough to check your ego at the door so that you can deal with what's actually happening in the moment of feedback. And again, you have to be courageous enough not to want to protect yourself and to realize that you're going to be incredibly uncomfortable. If you are not someone that gives feedback often, it's going to be very uncomfortable for you to start having these tough love conversations off the bat. Once you start developing a bit of a resistance to that discomfort, you'll fly and you'll be a high impact machine. Okay, so now that we have our context set, I just want to, as this first session, we're going to just very quickly go over I want to give you a precursor for what to expect in the next sessions. Okay. So what we're going to be doing in the next couple of sessions is taking our definition and really just unpacking that, and then seeing what needs to be reframed and what kind of needs to be tossed out and kept. So if we look at our definition, feedback is the art of communicating to someone. Okay, so there's so much in that, guys. If we just stay in that space. Communication, fundamentally, a lot of people go through life thinking that if they speak, they have communicated. Okay, and that is probably the biggest self-sabotaging, self-limiting belief that you can have when it comes to human interaction. It is the job. If I'm the person delivering a message like I am now in session 1, it is my job not just to deliver the message through verbal communication, but it's to make sure that it has been received, that you understand what I'm trying to say or the message I'm trying to deliver. And think about how complicated that is, right? When I speak, I'm formulating thoughts and ideas and a message based on all of the total sum of my experience, my frameworks, my perceptions. It's all coming through my filters. So when I choose certain words, that's coming through a filtered system. So the assumption that what I'm saying is going to land exactly like that with you is completely erroneous. So, and we'll get into this practically unpacking, but there are some absolute surefire ways to check understanding in communication, especially during feedback. Now, I'm going to share something with you, which it's a bit premature, but I think it's important. So remember, when you're giving someone feedback, okay, because of the nature of feedback is about where there is a disconnect, whether it be your behavior, your inputs, and your environment, you're giving someone feedback about their disconnects. From a neurological point of view, you're triggering a flight, fight, or freeze response, right? When in the caveman days, when we saw danger, our bodies had a physical reaction. It was fight, flight, or freeze. You know, there's a tiger in the cave, run, or don't run, figure it out. Giving feedback triggers the same fight, flight, or freeze response, okay? It still triggers that prehistoric, very guttural, very underdeveloped part of our brains that says danger. So feedback is triggering this kind of danger, this very primal danger response. So if you understand that, when you feel like you're under attack, how much do you hear? How much do you take in? How much are you able to really understand what you're saying? And I'll get into how we distill language, and I'll get into all of the meat of how we make sure that communication is landed. It's so exciting. But just remember, from this first session, I want you to walk away with something usable already. So just remember, when you are communicating, everything you say is coming from your point of view, okay? You have to understand that when you're giving feedback, not only are you trying to navigate the fact that you are not the same people with the same references and frameworks and perceptions and life experiences, which means there could be a disconnect in the actual language choice, but also that you're triggering this very primitive fight, flight, or freeze response, and that you've got to be able to navigate that in order to have meaningful communication. Communication is not just vomiting a message on someone. It's the art of communication. It's making sure that you have been understood and that human is resonating with what you're trying to say. Okay, so that was just feedback is the art of communication. And then, so I'm just going to touch on this next part, and then we will get into the rest in the next sessions. So if we take a look at our definition, we've covered that feedback is the art of communicating to someone. A disconnect in their behavior, inputs, or environment. So I want to just go to this disconnect thing, and we'll touch on it very briefly because we do unpack this in a much larger degree in the next sessions. Okay, the disconnect is twofold. As a leader in an organization, if you have a set basket of expectations and that are not being met, there is a very real disconnect between your expectations and the feedback receiver's ability to meet those expectations. So your feedback's going to be around that disconnect. Then there are like the interpersonal kind of situations where there is a disconnect between how someone is saying they want to show up and how they're actually showing up. So a disconnect between what they say, what they do, and what people's perceptions are. And I think that that's probably the most difficult thing to give feedback around, because it's really personal. When you're giving someone feedback about their behavior, behavior especially, I think, could get really tricky, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that. How do I give someone feedback around their behavior in a way that makes them excited and engaged and ready to pivot? It's tricky, but we've got a framework that we can share with you, and that I use very effectively. Like, I'm the most effective feedback giver, even if I have to say so myself. So I think giving feedback in the space of behavioral feedback is probably going to be the toughest learning curve. But if we land that correctly, and if you leverage the frameworks and the super skills that you're going to be equipped with in this incubation space, you are absolutely going to be able to navigate that in a way that gets people super excited about leaning into feedback conversations with you. Guys, we have so much still to cover. We've got to talk about inputs and how we give feedback around that, and what that means. There's a lot of role play that we're going to do around creating an environment where the environment will produce the results in terms of setting you up for proper feedback, how to make people feel safe, how to get them to lean in. It's going to be a very, very jam-packed course. Like I said, there's a lot of reframing that's going to be taking place over the next couple of sessions. So make sure that you do allow some of these things to marinate, because that's where the real magic is going to come in. I've got a workbook with some reflection questions. I would recommend very highly that you do those reflection questions and you keep going back to them. This is a self-driven course, so you decide how quickly you want to get through it, or how slow and steady you want to take. It's completely up to you. Go through the reflection questions, sit in those questions for a minute, ask yourself how it is you're showing up and where you're at. And I cannot wait to see you in the next session, where we start really unpacking some helpful high impact frameworks for feedback giving and receiving. See you next time.